Sierra thought I couldn't hear her whisper through the wall. "The old man won't last much longer with those lungs, and then everything will be ours." She was talking about my husband Thomas like he was just another fence to tear down. "My name's Lucinda Stone, 62, half-Cheyenne, and I've spent 40 years building this Wyoming ranch with my bare hands. 3 months since my son Daniel fell from his horse, I was still grieving, nursing my dying husband and watching his widow move through our home like a vulture circling. She thought I was too broken to fight. But I learned long ago how to read an enemy before she strikes, and when I found what she tried to burn, I knew exactly how to end this. Have you ever pretended to be weak while secretly planning your revenge? Tell me your story in the comments. Subscribe to this channel because what I discovered in that blanket exposed 2 murders and saved my granddaughter's life. The Wyoming dawn broke cold and sharp that October morning, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. I'd been awake since before first light. A habit 40 years on this ranch had burned into my bones. The wind carried the scent of sage and coming snow, whispering warnings my Cheyenne mother had taught me to hear. Thomas was coughing again. I could hear him from our bedroom, that wet, rattling sound that had gotten worse through the summer. I heated water over the stove, crushing dried yarrow and elderflower between my palms the way my mother showed me when I was just a girl. White medicine couldn't touch what ailed him. The harsh Wyoming winters had settled deep in his lungs. But the old Cheyenne remedies, those still helped. "Drink this," I told him, helping him sit up against the pillows. His hand shook as he took the cup. 68 years old, and he looked ancient now, his face carved with lines of pain and hard living. We'd built this ranch together, survived droughts and blizzards and Cheyenne raids back when the territory was still wild. Now he could barely get out of bed. "You're too good to me, Lucy," he whispered, using the name only he called me. Everyone else used Lucinda, but to Thomas, I'd always been his Lucy. "Hush now, save your strength." I kissed his weathered forehead and left him to rest. The barn was my sanctuary. The horses nickered softly as I entered, their breath steaming in the cold air. I fed them handfuls of oats, checked their hooves, ran my hands along their flanks looking for injuries or illness. Daniel used to do this work. My son had loved these animals, understood them in a way that made him the best horseman in 3 counties. 6 months. 6 months since they'd brought his broken body home told me his horse had spooked and thrown him against the rocks up in the high country. 6 months since I'd buried my only child in the hard Wyoming earth. I pressed my forehead against the warm neck of Daniel's favorite mare, feeling the tears I'd held back all morning finally break free. The horse stood still, patient, as if she understood my grief. "Grandma," I turned to see little Lucy standing in the barn doorway, still in her nightgown despite the cold. 3 years old, with Daniel's dark eyes and hair that held hints of the Cheyenne blood running through our family. She clutched a worn cloth doll, her feet bare on the frozen ground. "Child, where are your shoes?" I hurried to her, scooping her up. Her skin was ice cold. "Where's your mother?" Lucy's little face crumpled. "Mama said go away. Said she's busy." Anger flared hot in my chest. I carried Lucy back toward the house, wrapping her in my shawl. Through the kitchen window, I could see Sierra sitting at the table, perfectly dressed in her riding clothes, sipping coffee and reading a letter. Not once did she look toward the door, toward her daughter shivering outside in the October cold. Sierra. Beautiful, cold Sierra with her golden hair and empty eyes. Daniel had been so proud when he married her 3 years ago, brought her home to the ranch like she was some kind of prize. But I'd seen something in her from the first day, something calculating behind that pretty smile. My mother used to say I had the sight could read spirits the way others read tracks. And Sierra's spirit had always felt wrong to me. I dressed Lucy in warm clothes, fed her cornmeal mush with honey, watched her little face brighten as she ate. This child was all I had left of my son. And every day I watched Sierra treat her with the same cold indifference she showed everything else on this ranch. "Tell me about Papa," Lucy whispered, her small hand finding mine. My throat tightened. "Your Papa was the bravest man I ever knew, strong and kind, just like his grandfather." I stroked her soft hair, so like Daniel's had been. "He loved you more than anything in this world." But as I said the words, something nagged at me. something I'd been pushing away for months. Daniel's horse had never spooked at anything. He'd trained that mare himself, gentle and steady. And the day he died, the weather had been clear, the trail familiar. Nothing about that accident had made sense. I looked through the window at Sierra still reading her letter with that slight smile on her lips. And for the first time, I let myself think the thought I'd been avoiding. What if it hadn't been an accident at all? Have you ever had a gut feeling about someone, a knowing deep in your bones that something was wrong even when you had no proof? Did you listen to it, or did you push it away because the truth was too terrible to face? I'm asking because I almost waited too long. I was splitting firewood behind the house when I saw her. Sierra walking with quick, determined steps toward the burn pile near the barn, something bundled in her arms. The afternoon sun caught the color, that soft mint green I'd recognize anywhere. Lucy's blanket. I'd knitted that blanket myself when Daniel told me Sierra was expecting. Spent 3 months on it, every stitch a prayer for my grandchild's health and happiness. It was the only thing Lucy would sleep with, clutching it against her chest every night like it was the only safe thing in her small world. My hands stilled on the axe handle. Why would Sierra be throwing it away? I stepped back into the shadow of the woodshed watching. Sierra glanced over her shoulder once-twice like a coyote checking for threats. Her movements were jerky, nervous. She wasn't just disposing of an old blanket, she was hiding something. When she reached the burn pile, she stopped, her head swiveled, scanning the ranch yard. I pressed myself against the weathered wood, barely breathing. The wind carried the sound of Thomas's coughing from inside the house, the distant lowing of cattle in the far pasture. Sierra's hands clenched and unclenched on the blanket. Then, instead of tossing it onto the burn pile where it would be reduced to ash within hours, she turned sharply and walked behind the barn. I heard the soft thud of something being thrown, then her footsteps quick and light hurrying back toward the house. I waited, counted to 100 the way my mother taught me when patience was required for the hunt. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my breathing stayed steady. Whatever Sierra was hiding, she didn't want it found, which meant I needed to find it. The blanket lay in a crumpled heap behind the barn, half buried in old hay and dirt. I knelt beside it, my knees protesting against the hard ground. The mint green wool was dirty but intact, the lace edges I'd crocheted still firm and white. I lifted it carefully, shaking off the dust. It was heavier than I remembered, much heavier. My fingers traced the familiar pattern, the rows of careful stitches I'd made by lamplight while Daniel and Sierra slept upstairs. But there, right in the center, something felt wrong. A hardness beneath the soft wool, a rectangular shape that shouldn't be there. I turned the blanket over. The backing looked normal at first glance, but when I ran my hand across it, I found what I was looking for, a seam that didn't match the others. The stitches were smaller, tighter, done with thread that was almost the same color as the blanket, but not quite. Someone had opened the blanket, hidden something inside, and sewn it back up. Someone who knew how to sew well enough to make it nearly invisible. Sierra. My throat went dry. I looked toward the house, half expecting to see her watching from a window, but the glass panes reflected only sky and clouds. She thought she'd disposed of the evidence. She thought whatever secret she'd hidden in my granddaughter's blanket would burn to nothing, leaving no trace. But the spirits had other plans. My mother used to say that secrets have weight that they pull at the world until they're revealed. I'd never understood what she meant until this moment, kneeling in the dirt behind the barn, holding proof that Sierra had hidden something important enough to destroy a child's most precious possession. I folded the blanket carefully, tucking it under my arm. My hands were shaking now, not from cold, but from the electric feeling of discovery. Whatever was sewn inside this wool, it was the key to understanding what had happened to my son. I walked back to the house on legs that felt both weak and strong at the same time. Lucy was napping in her room. Thomas was asleep, his breathing labored but steady. Sierra was nowhere to be seen, probably in her room, thinking she'd successfully hidden whatever truth she was running from. I went to my bedroom and closed the door, laid the blanket on the bed, and stared at it for a long moment. Once I opened it once, I saw what was inside. There would be no going back. The truth, whatever it was, would change everything. My sewing scissors sat in their basket by the window, the same scissors I'd used to cut the thread when I finished this blanket 3 years ago. I picked them up, feeling their familiar weight in my palm. The afternoon light slanted through the window, turning the mint green wool almost golden. I found the hidden seam again, positioned the scissors at the starting point, and began to cut. Thread by thread, stitch by stitch, the secret began to reveal itself. When you stumble onto something hidden, something that could shatter everything you thought you knew, do you open it right away, or do you hesitate? Do you fear the truth more than the lie I almost stopped cutting? Almost convinced myself ignorance was safer. Would you have kept going? The last thread parted and the hidden seam fell open. My fingers found paper inside the batting, several sheets folded tight and bound with leather. I pulled them out, hands trembling. Letters. A stack of letters in a woman's flowing script. The top one read, "My dearest C." Not Daniel. Someone else. I unfolded the first letter. The date made my stomach clench, April 1885. 2 years ago, just months after their marriage. "My dearest C, I cannot stop thinking about our afternoon by the creek. When you held me, I felt more alive than I ever have with him. Daniel is a good man, but he's not you. I married him for security for this ranch, but my heart belongs only to you." The words blurred. I forced myself to keep reading. There were a dozen letters, each more intimate than the last. Sierra writing about stolen moments, secret meetings when Daniel worked the far pastures. And always she spoke of my son as an obstacle. The dates moved forward through the seasons. Sierra's patience wore thin. "I'm tired of waiting, C. I'm tired of pretending. Daniel suspects nothing, the fool. But I can't keep living this lie. We need to act." My blood ran cold at the next letter, dated March 1887. "Daniel is the only thing standing between us and the life we deserve. This ranch will be worth a fortune once Thomas dies. If Daniel were gone, I'd inherit everything. We could sell it, start fresh, somewhere no one knows us. California, maybe. Somewhere we can finally be free." I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from screaming. She'd been planning this, planning to kill my son for money and freedom. But there was one more letter. The paper was newer, dated April 15th, 1887. The day before Daniel died. "See, it's done. Everything is ready. I checked the saddle this morning. The girth strap is cut halfway through, just like you said. It'll hold at first, but when he pushes the horse hard on the rocky trail, it'll snap. The fall will look like an accident. Tomorrow morning, I'll suggest he check the high pasture. By tomorrow night, I'll be a widow. Burn this after you read it. We can't risk anyone finding proof." The letter slipped from my fingers. Daniel hadn't died in an accident. The saddle had been sabotaged. Cut. Deliberately weakened so it would fail at exactly the right moment, sending my son tumbling to his death. Sierra had murdered him. Planned it, executed it, then stood at his funeral accepting condolences from neighbors who had no idea they were comforting a killer. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those letters scattered around me. The afternoon light shifted. Lucy's voice called for water somewhere in the house. Thomas coughed, that wet rattle echoing in my chest. And Sierra was probably in her room thinking she destroyed the evidence. But she'd made one mistake. She'd kept the letters, maybe as insurance against this man C. Maybe because some part of her wanted proof of her own ruthlessness. She'd hidden them in the one place she thought they'd burn without question, a child's blanket meant for the fire. She hadn't counted on a grandmother's instinct. I gathered the letters carefully, my hands steady now, despite the rage burning through my veins. I would not cry. Not yet. There would be time for tears later. Right now, I needed to think, needed to plan, because Sierra wasn't the only one who could plot and scheme. And unlike her, I had something she didn't, the truth. And the determination to see justice done, no matter what it cost me. My son's killer was living under my roof, sleeping in his bed, raising his child, but not for much longer. If you discovered proof that someone you knew, someone living under your own roof, had murdered your child, what would you do? Would you go to the law and risk them escaping on a technicality? Or would you handle it yourself the way we did on the frontier? I rode out before dawn while Sierra still slept and Thomas's breathing rattled soft in our bedroom. The letters were tucked inside my jacket, pressed against my heart like a brand. But before I could decide what to do with them, I needed counsel from someone who understood both worlds I walked between. Morning Dove lived on the Cheyenne Reservation 15 miles northwest of the ranch. The ride took me through country that grew wilder with each mile, sage-covered hills giving way to rocky outcrops, the Wind River Mountains rising purple in the distance. My horse knew the way. I'd made this journey countless times over the years, seeking my mother's oldest friend when white medicine failed, or when my spirit needed guidance only another Cheyenne woman could provide. The sun was climbing when I reached her lodge, a sturdy canvas structure set apart from the others. Smoke rose from the center hole, carrying the scent of sage and sweetgrass. She was expecting me. She always knew when I was coming. "Name's Estse," she greeted me in Cheyenne, then switched to English. "Come, daughter of my heart. Your face carries heavy shadows." I dismounted, tied my horse, and followed her inside. The lodge was warm, comfortable, filled with the herbs and medicines of her trade. We sat on buffalo robes, and I pulled out the letters with shaking hands. "Read these," I said. "Tell me if I'm seeing clearly or if grief has clouded my eyes." Morning Dove took the letters, her weathered face growing darker with each page. When she finished, she looked at me with eyes that had seen too much sorrow in her 60 years. "Your son was murdered," she said simply. "This woman's spirit is twisted, broken. I felt it the first time I saw her, but your Daniel was so happy I said nothing." She touched my hand. "I'm sorry, old friend. I need to know what to do," I whispered. "The law is slow. The nearest federal marshal is 3 days' ride. By the time he comes, Sierra could disappear. Take Lucy with her." At Lucy's name, Morning Dove's expression shifted. She set the letters aside and took both my hands in hers, her grip strong despite her age. "There is something else," she said. "Something I've felt but couldn't name until now. The child, little Lucy. Her spirit doesn't match the mother's." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "When a child is born of a woman's body, there is a connection, a thread between their spirits that I can see, can feel. But when I look at Lucy and this Sierra woman together, there is no thread, only emptiness." My heart began to pound. "You're saying Lucy isn't Sierra's daughter?" "I'm saying what I see." Morning Dove released my hands and reached for her medicine bag. She pulled out a small bundle of sage, lit it from the fire, and waved the smoke around us. "Tell me, when was the child born? What month?" I thought back. "Sierra said she gave birth in January 3 years ago, but—" I paused, a memory stirring. "She wore loose dresses that whole winter. I never saw her belly grow large the way it should have. She said she carried small, that it was her first child, and her body didn't show much." "And you believed her?" "Daniel believed her. I had no reason to doubt." But even as I said it, I remembered the unease I'd felt. The way Sierra had kept to herself those last months, had refused to let me help prepare for the birth, had sent word after the baby came rather than calling for me beforehand like most women did. Morning Dove nodded slowly. "Count back 9 months from January. That would put conception in April of the previous year. Your son married this woman when— March of that year." My throat went dry. "You're saying she was already pregnant when they married? Or she was never pregnant at all?" Morning Dove's eyes held mine. "There are ways to fake such things. Padding beneath dresses, lies about timing. And there are young women on the reservation who find themselves with child and no husband, no family to help them." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You think Sierra took someone else's baby, presented it as her own?" "I think you should ask questions. Find out if any young Cheyenne women disappeared around that time. Women who might have had newborn daughters." My mind raced. If Lucy wasn't Sierra's biological child, then whose was she and what had happened to her real mother? "There's more," Morning Dove said quietly. "I've heard whispers on the reservation. A girl named Rose Whitehorse. She vanished 3 years ago, just after giving birth. Some said she ran away ashamed of her unmarried state, but her family never believed it. They said Rose loved her baby too much to abandon her. Rose Whitehorse." The name settled into my chest like a stone. "What happened to her?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. Morning Dove's face was grave. "No one knows. She simply disappeared, and her baby disappeared with her." I rode back from the reservation with Morning Dove's words burning in my mind. Rose Whitehorse, a young Cheyenne mother who'd vanished with her newborn daughter 3 years ago. The same time Sierra claimed to have given birth. It couldn't be coincidence. Sierra had ridden into town that afternoon. I'd heard her horse leave while I was still saddling mine for the return journey. She wouldn't be back until evening. Thomas was sleeping, his breathing labored but steady. And Lucy was napping in her small room, clutching the doll I'd sewn for her last winter. I had time to search. Time to find proof. Sierra's room was at the end of the hallway, the door always closed. I'd respected her privacy before, never had reason to intrude. But privacy was a luxury murderers didn't deserve. The room was neat, almost austere. Sierra kept few personal items, some dresses hanging in the wardrobe, a brush and mirror on the dresser, a Bible that looked like it had never been opened. Nothing that spoke of sentiment or attachment. Nothing that revealed the woman beneath the beautiful mask. But there had to be something. People who kept letters hidden in blankets kept other secrets too. I started with the wardrobe, running my hands along the back wall, checking for loose boards. Nothing. The dresser drawers held only clothes folded with military precision. Under the bed, I found dust and a single leather boot that had lost its mate. Then I saw it. In the corner, half hidden behind a trunk that held winter blankets, another trunk. Smaller, older, made of dark wood with tarnished brass corners. It was pushed against the wall as if Sierra wanted to forget it existed. I dragged it into the light. No lock, just a simple latch. My hands shook as I opened it. The smell hit me first, sage and sweetgrass, the scent of Cheyenne lodges. Inside, wrapped in soft deer skin, were baby clothes. Not the cotton and lace that white women made, but traditional Cheyenne garments. A tiny dress decorated with intricate beadwork in patterns of blue and white. Small moccasins, soft as butter, with quillwork flowers on the toes. A cradle board beautifully carved with a protective charm woven into the wrapping. These weren't things you bought. These were things made with love, stitch by careful stitch by hands that knew the old ways. And, embroidered on the dress in careful thread, was a name, Rose. My vision blurred. I lifted the dress with trembling fingers, holding it to the light streaming through the window. The beadwork was exquisite, the kind that took months to complete, a mother's work. A mother preparing for her child with joy and hope, never knowing that child would be stolen from her. Beneath the clothes, I found more. A bundle of dried herbs tied with sinew, the kind Cheyenne women used after childbirth for healing. A small rattle made from rawhide and filled with seeds. And at the very bottom, wrapped in cloth, a photograph. The image was faded but clear enough. A young Cheyenne woman, perhaps 20 years old, with long dark hair and eyes that held both strength and gentleness. She was smiling, one hand resting on her rounded belly. On the back, written in careful English, Rose Whitehorse, Autumn 1883. Pregnant, hopeful, alive. I sank onto the floor, the photograph clutched in my hand. This was Lucy's mother. This beautiful young woman who'd made these clothes with such care, who'd prepared for her daughter's arrival with traditional ceremonies and prayers. And Sierra had killed her, taken her baby, presented Lucy to Daniel as their own child. My son had never known. He'd loved Lucy with his whole heart, believing she was his daughter by blood. He'd died never knowing the truth that the woman he married was a monster who'd murdered a young mother and stolen her infant. How had Sierra done it? Had she befriended Rose during her pregnancy, gained her trust? Had she offered help when Rose had nowhere else to turn? And then when the baby was born, had she simply taken what she wanted and disposed of the mother like trash? The cruelty was breathtaking. The calculated evil of it made my stomach turn. I carefully repacked the trunk, every item a piece of evidence. Rose's family deserved to know what happened to their daughter, and Lucy deserved to know who her real mother was, a brave Cheyenne woman who'd loved her enough to make these beautiful things, even though she must have been alone and afraid. Sierra had taken everything from Rose, her life, her child, her future, and she'd done it without remorse, without hesitation, because Rose was just another obstacle in the way of what Sierra wanted. Just like Daniel had been an obstacle. Just like Thomas would be once Sierra tired of waiting for his illness to take him. I closed the trunk and pushed it back into its corner. Sierra couldn't know I'd found it. Not yet. Not until I had a plan. But now I knew the full scope of her evil. 2 murders. Maybe more I hadn't discovered yet. And all of it hidden behind that pretty face and those empty eyes. The next morning, I found Miguel mending fence near the north pasture. He'd worked for us 20 years since before Daniel was born. A good man, quiet but observant. The kind who saw everything and said little. "Miguel," I called, dismounting. "I need to ask you something." He set down his tools, his weathered face cautious. "Señora Lucinda, have you ever seen Sierra with a man, a stranger, someone who didn't belong on the ranch?" His eyes flickered. He knew something. "Why do you ask?" "Because my son didn't die in an accident, and I need to know who helped kill him." The words hung in the air between us. Miguel removed his hat, turning it in his hands. Finally, he nodded. There was a man. I saw him twice, maybe 3 times. Always when Señor Daniel was away with the cattle. He would come at dusk, leave before dawn. I thought... He paused, uncomfortable. I thought it was not my place to say. What did he look like? Tall, dark hair, dark eyes, dressed like a drifter, worn clothes gun belt low on his hip. He had a scar here. Miguel touched his left cheekbone. Like a knife cut old but deep. My pulse quickened. Did you hear a name? Once. I was in the barn when they didn't know I was there. She called him Cole. Cole. The C from the letters. Finally, a full name. Where is he now? Miguel shook his head. I haven't seen him since Señor Daniel died. But men like that, they don't go far. Probably in town drinking away whatever she paid him. I thanked him and rode to the neighboring ranch where Esther Campbell was hanging laundry in the sharp wind. She was 55, practical as fence posts, and had never liked Sierra. Esther, I said without preamble, tell me what you've seen. She glanced toward her house, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're asking about Sierra. I'm asking about the truth. Esther's mouth tightened. I've seen things that didn't sit right. That woman never loved your son. Anyone with eyes could see it. And she treats little Lucy like the child's a burden instead of a blessing. She paused. And yes, I saw a man. Same one Miguel probably told you about. Cole something. Brennan, I think. He was at your ranch 3-4 times that I noticed, always when Daniel was gone. Did you tell anyone? Who was I going to tell Daniel was happy or thought he was? And Sierra... Esther's face hardened. That woman has a way of making people believe whatever she wants them to believe. Pretty face, sweet smile, lies smooth as butter. I showed her the letters, watched her face pale as she read. Dear God, she whispered, she murdered him. And a young Cheyenne woman named Rose stole her baby. Esther's hand flew to her mouth. Lucy. Lucy is Rose's daughter. Sierra killed her mother and took her. For a moment, Esther couldn't speak. Then, what are you going to do? I'm going to the sheriff. But I need you to be willing to testify to what you saw. I will, gladly. Sheriff Jim Crawford's office in town was small, dusty, and smelled of old coffee and tobacco. He was a fair man, former cavalry, but he was also realistic about what the law could do on the frontier. I laid everything before him. The letters, Rose's photograph, the witness statements from Miguel and Esther. I told him about the saddle sabotage, about Rose's murder, about the stolen child. Crawford listened, his face growing grimmer with each revelation. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and rubbed his jaw. Mrs. Stone, this is as bad as anything I've seen, and I believe you. But here's the problem. He tapped the letters. These prove intent and conspiracy, but they don't prove Sierra actually cut that saddle. Cole Brennan did that according to the letter. And as for Rose Whitehorse, he shook his head. Her body was never found. Without a body, proving murder is near impossible. So Sierra walks free. I didn't say that. I'm saying we need more. I need to find Cole Brennan and get him to confess. I need physical evidence, the saddle, if it still exists. And I need time. Time, my voice rose. While you're gathering evidence, Sierra could disappear. Take Lucy with her. How much time do you need? The nearest federal marshal is in Cheyenne. 3 days' ride. I've sent word, but he's got jurisdiction over half of Wyoming territory. Could be a week, could be 2 before he gets here. 2 weeks. I stood, fury and frustration warring in my chest. My son has been dead 6 months. Rose Whitehorse has been dead 3 years. How many more people have to die while we wait for the law? Crawford stood too, his face sympathetic but firm. I understand your anger, Mrs. Stone, but if you take matters into your own hands, you become the criminal. Let me do my job. I walked out without another word. The sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. Somewhere in this town, Cole Brennan was drinking or gambling or sleeping, unaware that his name had been spoken, that his crimes were known. The law wanted time, but time was a luxury I couldn't afford. When the law tells you to wait, to trust the system while the guilty walk free and more lives hang in the balance, do you obey, or do you take justice into your own hands? After leaving Sheriff Crawford's office, I didn't go home. Miguel had seen Cole Brennan in the Lucky Star Saloon that very morning. If I waited, he might disappear, and I couldn't let that happen. I found Miguel outside the general store. "Come with me," I said. "Bring Esther's husband if he's willing. I need witnesses." Within the hour, we walked into the Lucky Star. The saloon was half full, men drinking away the afternoon. Conversations died when they saw me. A woman entering a saloon wasn't common, especially not a woman with blood in her eyes. Cole sat at a back table, cards spread before him, whiskey at his elbow. He looked exactly as Miguel had described, tall, dark-haired, with that knife scar cutting across his left cheekbone. When he saw us approaching, his hand moved toward his gun. "I wouldn't," Miguel said quietly. Several townsmen stood from their tables, moving closer. Word had spread. They wanted to hear this. Cole's hand stopped. "What do you want?" I threw the letters on the table. "The truth about how you murdered my son." His face went white. He grabbed for the letters, but I was faster. Around us, men pressed closer, their faces hard. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The girth strap is cut halfway through," I quoted. "It'll hold at first, but when he pushes hard on the rocky trail, it'll snap. Those are your instructions to Sierra, written in her hand. That doesn't prove?" "Miguel saw you at my ranch, multiple times, always when Daniel was away." I leaned forward. "Every man here knows your name now, Cole Brennan. You can't run far enough." The men murmured agreement. Someone spat tobacco juice near his boots. Cole reached for his whiskey with shaking hands. The silence pressed down on him like a physical weight. Finally, he broke. "She said it would be easy," he whispered. "Said he'd never feel it." And then it all came out. How Sierra had seduced him 2 years ago. How she'd promised money and freedom if he'd help eliminate the obstacle in her way. How he'd cut the saddle girth that April morning just enough that it would fail under stress. How he'd watched from the ridge as Daniel rode up the trail, watched the girth snap, watched my son fall. "She paid me $200 after," he said hollowly. "Promised more once the old man died and she could sell the ranch." "When is she planning to leave?" I demanded. "Soon. Days, maybe. She's getting nervous. Knows people are asking questions." His red-rimmed eyes met mine. "She'll kill you too, Mrs. Stone, if you get in her way. She's got no conscience. I thought I was hard, but that woman—" He shuddered. "She's planning to take the child and the deed. Anyone who tries to stop her ends up dead." My blood ran cold. "Lucy, Thomas, both at the ranch with Sierra right now." "Miguel," I said urgently, "get Sheriff Crawford. Tell him everything Cole just confessed. Have him bring men to my ranch within the hour." I was already moving toward the door. Cole called after me. "Be careful, Mrs. Stone, if she knows you're coming." I didn't wait to hear the rest. I ran for my horse, my heart pounding. Sierra was cornered now, and cornered animals were the most dangerous. I had exposed her crimes publicly. By now, word would be spreading through town. She'd know her time was running out. And desperate people did desperate things. I rode for home as the sun began to set, praying I wouldn't be too late. I rode back to the ranch as twilight fell, the letters tucked safely in my jacket. Word would spread from the saloon, it always did. By morning, everyone would know what Sierra had done. But morning might be too late. The house was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. Thomas was asleep upstairs, his breathing labored. Lucy's door was closed, and Sierra's horse was in the barn. She was home. I laid the letters on the kitchen table deliberately. Let her see them. Let her know. Footsteps on the stairs. Sierra appeared in the doorway, still in her riding dress. She saw me first, then the letters. Her face went white. "Where did you get those?" "From your granddaughter's blanket, the one you tried to burn." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Sierra's hand disappeared into the folds of her skirt and came out holding a small revolver, the kind women carried for protection, the kind that could kill at close range. "You couldn't leave it alone," she said, her voice cold. "You just had to keep digging." "You murdered my son." My voice was steady despite the gun pointed at my chest. "You murdered Rose Whitehorse. You stole her baby." Rose was nobody. A half-breed girl with no family, no future. She should have been grateful I took the child, gave her a better life than some reservation hovel. Sierra's finger moved to the trigger. And Daniel was weak. He would have run this ranch into the ground. I did what needed to be done. "You did it for money." "I did it for freedom." Her voice rose, cracking. Do you know what it's like to be trapped to smile and pretend and play the dutiful wife while your soul dies? I deserved better than this life. Better than this God-forsaken ranch and this dying old man upstairs. Thomas never hurt you. Thomas is next. She said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. I was going to wait, let nature take him, but you forced my hand. I'll shoot you both tonight. Make it look like you discovered an intruder tried to defend Thomas failed. By the time anyone finds the bodies, Lucy and I will be halfway to California. Lucy isn't going anywhere with you. Sierra laughed sharp and bitter. Lucy is my ticket to this ranch, Daniel's heir. With her and the deed, I can sell everything and disappear. Without her, I'm just a widow with no claim. She's not your daughter. She's whoever I say she is, and dead women tell no tales. She raised the gun higher, aiming at my heart. Neither do dead grandmothers. I saw her finger tighten on the trigger. Saw the calculation in her eyes. She'd killed twice before. A third death meant nothing to her. But she'd made one mistake. She'd underestimated this old half-breed woman who'd survived 40 years on the frontier, who'd been taught by her Cheyenne mother to read an enemy's eyes, to see the moment before they struck. I moved as she fired. The bullet tore through my sleeve, burning across my upper arm. Pain flared hot, but I was already moving, closing the distance between us before she could fire again. My mother had taught me to fight the Cheyenne way fast efficient, using an opponent's momentum against them. Sierra raised the gun for a second shot, but I grabbed her wrist, twisting hard. She screamed. The revolver clattered to the floor. We crashed against the table, letters scattering. Sierra clawed at my face, her nails drawing blood. But she'd lived soft all her life while I'd survived 40 years on the frontier. I drove my knee into her stomach. She doubled over, gasping. "You think you've won," she spat, reaching for the fallen gun. "You're just a dried-up old squaw." The door burst open. Morning Dove entered first, followed by Miguel Esther and a dozen men from town. Sheriff Crawford was right behind them, his hand on his revolver. They filled the kitchen, surrounding Sierra like wolves around cornered prey. I'd sent word before I left the saloon, told them to give me an hour, then come. I'd known this confrontation was inevitable, known Sierra would be desperate, and I'd wanted witnesses, people who would see her try to kill me, who would hear her confess. Sierra froze her hand inches from the gun. Crawford kicked it away. "Sierra Stone," he said, "you're under arrest for the murders of Daniel Stone and Rose Whitehorse, for conspiracy and attempted murder." "You can't prove anything!" Sierra's voice was shrill, now panicked. "She attacked me. I was defending myself." "We heard everything," Esther said coldly. "Through the window. How you killed Daniel for money. How you murdered Rose and stole her baby. How you planned to kill Lucinda and Thomas tonight." Sierra's face crumbled. She looked around the circle of hard faces, finding no sympathy. "I gave up everything for this ranch. I played the perfect wife, the devoted mother." "You played nothing," I said, my voice steady despite the blood running down my arm. "You murdered my son in cold blood. You killed a young Cheyenne mother and stole her child. You were planning to kill my husband and me. You're not a wife. You're not a mother. You're a murderer." Morning Dove stepped forward, her face grave. "Rose Whitehorse was my niece's daughter. Her family has mourned for 3 years, not knowing what happened to her. Now they will know, and they will see justice done." Sierra tried to run. Miguel and 2 other men caught her, easily holding her as Crawford pulled out handcuffs. "No," Sierra struggled, her composure finally breaking. "You don't understand. I had no choice. I was trapped." "You had choices," I said. "You chose murder. You chose theft. You chose evil, and now you'll face frontier justice." Crawford snapped the handcuffs shut. "Sierra Stone, you'll stand trial for multiple murders. And when you're found guilty, and you will be found guilty, you'll hang." Sierra screamed, then a sound of pure rage and desperation. But the men held her firm as Crawford led her toward the door. She turned back once, her beautiful face twisted with hate. "That child isn't yours. She'll never be yours. She's mine." "Lucy is Rose Whitehorse's daughter," Morning Dove said quietly. "And she will be raised by her grandmother who loves her. You are nothing to her now." They took Sierra into the night. Her screams faded as they loaded her onto a wagon bound for the territorial prison. Sierra hanged 3 weeks later, Cole Brennan followed 2 days after. I didn't attend either execution. I'd seen enough death. Instead, I stayed home with Lucy and Thomas. My husband's health improved once the weight of Sierra's presence lifted from our house. He could breathe easier, as if the air itself had been poisoned by her lies. Lucy was the hardest part. How do you tell a 3-year-old child that the woman she called mother was a murderer, that her real mother had been killed so Sierra could steal her mourning dove helped? She brought Rose's family, Rose's mother, her aunts, her grandmother. They came with gifts, a new cradleboard, beaded moccasins, stories of Rose's kindness and strength. They didn't come to take Lucy away. They came to give her the heritage Sierra had tried to erase. Your mother's name was Rose Whitehorse, I told Lucy, holding her small hands. She loved you so much that she made beautiful things for you. And when she couldn't stay with you anymore, she trusted that you'd find your way home to people who would love you just as much. Lucy looked at the photograph of Rose Young, smiling, hopeful. She's pretty, she whispered. Like you, Grandma. My throat tightened. You have her eyes, and her brave heart. The territorial judge granted me legal guardianship. Lucy Stone, daughter of Rose Whitehorse and granddaughter of Lucinda Stone. 2 mothers, 2 grandmothers, 2 cultures woven together like the blanket that had revealed the truth. Thomas lived another 5 years, long enough to teach Lucy to ride, to show her how to read the land, to pass on the ranch skills Daniel would have taught her. When he finally slipped away peacefully in his sleep, Lucy was 8 years old and strong enough to understand that death was part of the cycle. The ranch thrives now. Lucy is 16, wise beyond her years, moving between both her worlds with grace. She speaks English and Cheyenne. She knows the old ways and the new. She wears her grandmother Rose's beaded moccasins to Cheyenne gatherings and her riding boots to work cattle. Sometimes, on the clear autumn evenings, I watch her ride across the pasture and I see Daniel in her posture, Rose in her profile, and the future in her smile. The blanket, that mint green blanket that started everything, sits folded in Lucy's room. The letters are long gone, burned after the trial. But the blanket remains a reminder that truth always surfaces, that love transcends blood, and that justice, though it comes slowly on the frontier, eventually finds its way home. The Wyoming frontier taught me many things, but the hardest lesson came after my son Daniel's death. That truth carries weight and no lie can stay buried forever. Out here, we lived by a simple code: protect your kin, honor your word, and face evil when it comes for you. The law rode slow across these wild lands, so sometimes justice depended on a grandmother's courage and a community's backbone. Sierra thought she could hide her sins behind a pretty face, but she underestimated a mother's love and the strength of honest people. In 1887, I stood my ground, not just for Daniel and Rose, but for Lucy, to show her that women could fight, that heritage is power, and that truth outlives deceit. Now Lucy rides strong, speaking both English and Cheyenne, her boots and beaded moccasins marking 2 worlds united. She is my legacy, proof that love, not blood, defines a family. If this story moved, you share your thoughts below. Have you ever fought for truth when silence was easier? Subscribe to hear more tales of courage, justice, and survival from the Wyoming frontier. May you always ride with honor and never fear the truth.